Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 72. And as always, we have a special guest on the show. But before we get there, just be reminded that if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, we are also available in full Technicolor over on YouTube.
This one might be in black and white. Yeah, it'll ruin your intro that way, won't it?
Oh, yeah. No. Anyway, if you are interested in seeing our lovely faces in full Technicolor or black and white, then you can head over to youtube.com/camerashake. And once you're there, why don't you just hit the subscribe button, hit the like thing, and all of the bells and whistles, and whatever YouTubers tell you to do. That'd be super awesome because it would help us out a lot. Anyway.
Filmed in Panavision.
Oh, it is in Panavision.
Yeah.
There you go. Now, that being said, I never understood what it actually means. No idea. Anyway, that being said, we are here with none other than California-based, award-winning food photographer, director, educator, and the host of the We Eat Together YouTube channel. Get up for Mr. Skyler Burt right here on the show. Skyler, how are you?
Hey, man.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for inviting me on the podcast. It's going to be fun. I really enjoy doing podcasts, and I can't wait to do yours. So,
fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We've been, when we first started this podcast, or when we first decided to have guests on the show, there was like a little list that I made of like, wouldn't it be cool if, and then like a list of names. And
no
so
way I made that list.
Yeah, you did totally make that list.
Serious?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Really?
We've probably still got that
great.
list somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. We should
must have been like, how long was this list? 8,000 members?
No. It was
I'm at the bottom of this list. Yeah.
I mean, it started out very small.
Well,
it started out with maybe like 10 names, I guess, and then
it was number one, obviously.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I mean, you're in fact the second food photographer that we've had on the show.
That's true.
We've had a number of wedding photographers and a number of portrait photographers and so on. But food photography is one of those really cool, what do you want to call it, niches, of photography that is very specialized. And yet I feel like we see a lot of food photography on the likes of Instagram and, social media and stuff.
Yeah.
And now you see it every day. I mean, that's the great thing is most people don't really notice that they actually see it. I mean, they see it probably way more than Instagram. They see it, probably like 10,000 times a day, TV and billboards and, product placements just everywhere. So,
and cookbooks and, cookbooks and recipes and stuff.
The sides of boxes. I mean, it's really on everything. If you take the time to look.
So if you were to just say, so my impression of food photography is that the purpose of it is to make a consumer want to have that product. Is that fair to say that that's an overarching?
Yeah, I mean, in the commercial aspect, sure. Your goal is to make people want the product, whatever that product may be. Whether it's the pasta or it's the meatballs or it's the shopping center, that people go to, or if it's just selling recipes, I guess. But I mean, truly, like I'm a journalist, and so I kind of still hold on to a little bit of that journalism when it comes to food photography. And so for me, it still has a little bit of a historical value. Like this is our time and place in history. And this is what we eat. And this is what we put on our table. And this is the style of, cutlery and plates and, stuff that we use. And hopefully in 100 years from now, when people look back and go, oh, what did they have in 2021? We'll be able to show them. We'll have a very accurate picture of our time and place where they might have not had that in previous generations and up until like the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
There's actually a really interesting aspect of it for two reasons. One is I'm always fascinated. When you look at like period pieces, or you kind of think like, okay, so how were people eating, let's say in the 17th century, for example?
Yeah.
The fact that like, I don't know, forks weren't even invented yet or all that, that I find that really fascinating to see how, everyday things that we totally take for granted, in our lives today just simply didn't exist, or were used in a completely different way. Even the amount of spokes that forks had back in the 17th century was different. I think they only had
Were they
two.
tridents then?
No, I think they only had two. And I think people,
Really?
am I right in thinking that people used to bring their own cutlery to dinner? Like, almost like
Is that right? Really?
Swiss Army pocket knife. That's like, or
I really want that to be true.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think it's
Really?
actually true. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Why can't that be the case now? Because I'd bring, you get those really massive, oversized knife and forks, don't you? Every so often, yeah. That's what I'd take.
Or like the huge,
I'm eating with this
whole bottle wine glasses. So it's like having a glass of wine was actually a bottle in it.
There was that great British comedian back in the day, and he had like the oversized phone, and he would do these prank
Dom
shows.
Jolly.
That was Dom Jolly. Yeah. Trigger Happy TV.
Trigger Happy TV. That's it.
Yeah, Trigger
Exactly.
Happy TV. Yeah. And you would be that guy with the fork, though.
Oh yeah.
Massive fork, and start, dishing it up.
Shovel.
Awesome.
Yeah,
But the other thing that I find interesting about this is we had a conversation with Sean Tucker in last week's episode where we were talking about. So street photography is part of what he does, and we were talking about the fact that nowadays when you go and you shoot street, you very often find people buried in their phones, like their faces are literally buried in their phones, and I've heard this from other photographers. People get a little bit annoyed about the fact that everybody's looking at their phones, and it's kind of it's annoying. But he had a very interesting point, not too dissimilar to yours, where he said, well, this is a sign of our times. And if we're looking back at this in 100 years' time, where phones probably aren't even a thing anymore because we're all with brain implants or whatnot, this is really a sort of a telltale sign of what life was like back in the first half of the 21st century. What century are we in? 21st century. I'm so
Something like
retro, I forgot.
Yeah, I mean, that's my opinion, really, to all photography. I mean, okay, so a little bit about me, I guess, is I started in the journalism background, and I really wanted to be a newspaper photographer, like, the Times or National Geographic photographer. Yeah, I wanted to be like a war photographer, really, or maybe like an aftermath type photographer. But I was really focused on culture, and so I still hold a lot of that, I guess, when it comes to food photography. Maybe not so much in the photography realm, but kind of in my mentality, and the hope that in 100 years or 200 years from now, that maybe my images will be used as a historical reference for what we do in this time period, and so it kind of influences the props that I use, and maybe the type of food that I photograph, I guess, or the type of clients that I take on, I guess, all with this kind of thing in my head that maybe some day down the road, people will look at this and say, oh, this is what they did in 2021 or whenever I took the photograph, That's my hope.
See, I'm hoping that even in 100 years, people still eat waffles. That's,
Waffles.
Yeah, I'm a big
very
waffle.
specific.
I'm a waffle fan. That's,
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I can eat waffles all day long.
I think I've only
Like
eaten a waffle
American
once.
style, where you throw, a bunch of whipped cream and berries and syrup and
Fried
Snickers
chicken.
bars. And fried
Oh no,
chicken.
sweet waffles. Yeah, I'm a fluffy waffle guy. That's
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Much to the bemusement of the rest of my family, because obviously, my kids have grown up here, and they like the flat, like the British style, flat, thin pancakes.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like,
What do
I'm
you,
more of the.
do you throw
Yeah, they're
baked
awful.
beans on those, or what do you put on there?
That would surprise me, actually. Yeah, baked beans and like scrambled egg or something.
You two
Oh my
aren't
God,
allowed to gang up
tomato.
on me, by the way. You know that, right?
That's funny.
No, one
waffles.
of the best
Yeah.
places. I tell you, last time I went to Lake Tahoe on my honeymoon, actually, a few years ago. There's a place in Tahoe City called Heidi's, which is like a Waffle House, basically.
Okay.
Yeah,
In Lake
definitely.
Tahoe.
Yeah, in Tahoe
Wow.
City. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
it's a.
Not too far from there, actually.
Oh, great. Okay, whereabouts are you in Northern California?
Well, I'm in Utah. I'm in Salt Lake City, but that's only about, I don't know. It's pretty much a straight shot to Reno and then Lake Tahoe down below that. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it's not too far away. In British terms, it would be like going to the Czech Republic or something like that. Or
yeah, probably.
But here it's not too far. It's only like
for
6 hours.
For you, it's just a shopping trip, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go down there and buy my vegetables and come back. Yeah, no problem.
So,
That's it.
I need to know, have you guys had fried chicken and waffles?
Yeah.
Is that just a South thing?
I haven't had that.
No. Yeah, well, it is a very Southern thing, but yeah, they have it everywhere. And if you can find a good fried chicken and waffles and with some good syrup, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh.
I never thought I would like it because I'm the type of person where if syrup comes anywhere close to my bacon or my eggs or ketchup or anything that's like sweet comes anywhere near my savory, I freak out. And it's got to be like separated. There has to be like the wall of China in between, my
using the sausage as a breakwater.
I see that. No, I totally agree. Actually, I'm totally on your page. Absolutely. I totally agree with that.
But fried chicken and waffles for some reason is amazing. I actually did a job in the South. I was doing a job for the Time Food Studios. And I made it a mission to go around and try like the local food because Time Food Studios, I think it's actually Meredith now, but when it was Time Food Studios, it was in Birmingham, Alabama. And that was my first introduction to the South. It's actually like the first place I went to America after I came back to America. And I was like, I have to try Southern food. And so I was there for 6 days and I think I ate 3 meals at, a day at different restaurants. And I was trying all the Southern food, and fried chicken and waffles was fantastic. I had a little rosemary honey on there. It was so good.
Oh,
so good.
Yeah.
All right, now I'm hungry. I haven't had dinner.
See, I mix things up a little bit because I half my family are Canadian and the other half are German. I actually grew up in Germany for the most part.
Okay.
And so Germany, quark is a thing that's big in Germany. Quark. Yeah, it's like it's
what is that?
It's a dairy product. It's somewhere between. It's like somewhere between cottage cheese and cheese. I mean, it's very. Imagine cottage cheese without the lumps in it. I guess.
Okay.
But traditionally you basically use it as a spread and then you put jam on top. And it's like the best thing ever. But I tend to, it's like almost like 0 calories. I mean, it's like 0 fat. So it's really good from a health perspective. It's really good. And I use it a lot with waffles. Actually, that's my go-to waffle topping. It's like quark and strawberries.
Can you
like
buy it in a, can you buy it in like
you buy it in a tub. Yeah.
Okay.
And they started, maybe, I don't know, a few years ago, they started selling it over here in the UK. And so... or maybe I'm the only person who buys that at the superstore. Probably.
Yeah. That doesn't sound like something the Brits would typically go for.
It's it's good.
We're useless at food over here. Good God, we're really bad.
No, there's some good stuff.
Sadly, I've only been to the Heathrow Airport. They wouldn't let me out of the airport, so I had like a layover for I think 11 hours or something one time.
Oh wow!
I was like, I really want to get out of the the airport and smoke a cigarette. And they wouldn't let me for some reason. And well, it would take too long to get out and then back in, I guess. So I never actually stepped foot on British soil, but I always wanted to go, and try the food out and stuff like that. So maybe my next trip.
But I tell you what is actually remarkable about the UK, and this is really, I lived in a number of different places, New Orleans being one of them.
New Orleans,
where the food is amazing. But,
wow.
And Germany, actually, to be honest, the south of Germany is really good food too. But the amazing thing about the UK is...
Wait, you lived in New Orleans and you didn't have fried chicken and waffles?
No, I didn't. But I learned how to make a mean gumbo. So, that's the thing. But the thing about the
somebody
UK is...
in the YouTube comments right now, trying to, persecute you for not trying chicken and waffles.
Probably. That's it, yeah.
How dare you?
But I tell you, it's, what is cool about the UK food-wise is the fact that you'll find any ethnic food you could possibly think of in London. I mean, it's fair to say that, this is like, because it's such
is it watered down like America? because it's the same with America, but it's Americanized usually, and it's to the point where it's no longer reminiscent of where it actually came from. Like Italian food, for example, or something.
I think it is in general, but maybe not to that extent.
You can still find authentic restaurants.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, totally.
Can. Yeah. So the way we, I generally gauge, if it's not a British restaurant, is I'll gauge because I'll find out whether, say I want to go for Chinese food. If Chinese people eat there regularly,
that's true.
That's the one I'm going to choose and go to.
Sure.
Same for Thai food and French or.
I mean,
wait, there are no German restaurants.
Does it get worse as you get farther away from London? As far as the
it's probably not
goes?
as varied. Yes, I mean,
varies.
Basically, I think when you go to places like Birmingham, there's a large sort of non-British population there, but maybe not so much of a variety. So, for instance, if you're looking for Asian food or or Middle Eastern food, then maybe Birmingham would be a really great place to go. But I think if you're looking for like authentic Italian, then probably not so much because just as an example,
it's the same in America, really. You get outside of New York and LA and Chicago, the big cities, and it gets watered down the farther you get away from those cities.
Yeah.
But
Mexican
then,
food in Utah is not so good.
Yeah. But then, the closer, the closer you get to the coast, for instance, in the UK, the better the seafood gets. That's the obviously
really?
it comes with the territory.
You would hope. Yeah, you'd hope.
You'd hope, yeah. But I think it's true to say there are a lot of places at the coast where you get some awesome seafood. But I don't need
fish, not so much seafood. Fish, you can get really good fish on most of the coast around here.
Oysters, I think.
Can you get oysters here?
Yeah.
Are they any good?
Yeah, I think so. Well,
are they any good any time though?
That's a whole different.
That's a different question,
different discussion.
We're starting a whole whirlwind of comments on the YouTube section.
yeah.
How dare you say you
oysters,
can't get oysters on the British coast? Yeah. My family has an oyster farm.
Really?
No, I'm just saying that's what the YouTubers.
Sucked in
those comments like,
I don't know if you can get great lobster anywhere around here. I don't think. Not that I know.
That's because it's a Maine thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. We stole them all. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, Maine and Nova Scotia. I know there's a lot of cool lobster up in Nova Scotia too.
No, they don't have anything in Canada. Yeah, it's all America. Yeah.
Hey,
I knew I liked him.
We have moose.
No, I'm just joking.
Let me think. We have moose and national healthcare.
Yeah, well, no, our moose are bigger and better, and our national healthcare is non-existent. So you guys got to speed on that one. Yeah.
So
no, but I would love to travel to England one day. Yeah, one day. Yeah. It's so weird, like I travel a lot, and there's always every traveler has like a list of countries, and that usually is from the most exotic to the least exotic. And for some reason, England has been on, I guess, the bottom of the list. I really wanted to try, and go there every once in a while, but there's always seems to be some place, that's more exotic or something like that, and I just haven't made it to England yet, But
next time you need to transfer through Heathrow, just add on another few days to your trip, and we'll show you around.
Incidentally, Heathrow is actually I'm driving past Heathrow to get to Nick's place. So and we're
20 minutes from me.
Yeah, we literally live on either side of the airport.
Yes, that's funny. I used to be a pretty heavy smoker. I smoked like 2 packs a day or a pack and a half a day or whatever. And so airplane travel for me was horrendous.
Oh, yeah.
And going because I lived in the Middle East for like 8 years. And so I'd have to go back to America, I'd have to go somewhere else first. And one of the options was Heathrow for the most part. And I would avoid it because there was no smoking section in the airport. And so I'd always go to Istanbul because they had like a nice outdoor smoking section. Yeah. And so, I tried Heathrow once and then I just avoided it for the rest of the time. But now that I don't like smoke cigarettes, and I chew Nicorette gum, Uh, now that I don't do that, I could probably go back to England and fly through Heathrow, but I was kind of boycotting it there for a while because I think when I was traveling there, you guys were probably one of the first international airports to ban smoking just all outright, for incoming and outgoing flights. So I was like, darn it.
There's another London airport called Stansted. We're like, I don't know, 5 airports here. So there's another airport called Stansted, and the way that they got people to stop smoking was that they had this glass-walled smoking room.
Yeah.
And it was probably the most disgusting, even as a smoker. And I used to smoke cigarettes, but even as a smoker, you'd go in there,
and it was really small.
Oh my god, it was tiny, and it was just disgusting. Thick smoke.
It's like the size of a cell.
Yeah, everything was like layered in like yellow tar. Yeah. Oh my god!
It is all designed to get people to quit smoking. I swear to God, because even smokers can't handle the smoking room in airports if there's any smoking room allowed anywhere in the world. But I haven't actually been to a smoking room in a long time, but I remember they were really bad. You could peel off the nicotine from the wall. It was so gross. I know this has nothing to do with photography, but whatever. It's important.
It's fine.
Because most photographers, I think, smoke about 10 packs a day to get rid of the stress. But
I feel
maybe not so much now, but
I'm old enough to remember when you were still allowed to smoke on planes. I'm pretty sure when I was a kid.
On planes? Wow.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that when I was a kid.
I remember planes which still had the
ashtrays?
Old ashtrays.
Yeah.
In there.
Yeah, they don't anymore, do they? I think if you get on an airplane that has an ashtray, you should be scared. That airplane is pretty old. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But
60s.
I still remember it. Like, I'm pretty sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. You are old.
I know. I am old. What can I say? Impressive. I kept well.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No, exactly.
You look young. Yeah, so.
That's it.
Not young.
Wow.
Yeah.
What can I say?
Do you dye your hair? Is that it? Yeah.
No, not at all. It's my hair color is
good genetics.
It's the color of wisdom. That's what I call it.
It's got more wisdom since the last time I saw you.
Hey, it's silver.
That's why I wear a hat. In all my videos, I wear a hat because I have the age of wisdom going on up here.
There you go. See?
Yeah.
It's the Silver Brigade. That's where
I covered up. Yeah.
So you've
really
mentioned that
I'm not as old as my hair says I am.
But you mentioned that you spent some time in Oman. And so I know that from doing my research, of course, that before you got into food photography, you were actually a travel photographer.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that's how I got into food photography. I first went to journalism school. So I went to a school where you study what's called visual journalism. So you just study how to be a photographer for, journalistic photographer, but not so much writing, so it's like newspaper photographer or something like that. And I never really got inspired. I mean, I really wanted to be like a war photographer and all that stuff, but that was like when I was 20. And then I realized that there's not a lot of longevity in that career. Especially if you want to start a family and stuff, you spend most of your time traveling around to horrible places, and it just wasn't really suiting my lifestyle. But I always wanted to travel, and that's kind of the reason why I wanted to be a journalist, because I wanted to travel and experience all that stuff. But I figured if I could do that and if I could travel and still make money traveling, then that would be more beneficial than being a journalist. And especially like right around that time, Anthony Bourdain really made it huge. And I was always into food. And so I was watching, all that kind of programming. And when Anthony Bourdain came on the scene, he kind of just opened up the mix between food and travel. And that's where really I got my inspiration. Not so much on the food aspect, because I always was really interested in cooking and stuff, but I was never really a food photographer or much concerned about food photography. I appreciated it, but I never gave it much thought. And so I decided, why not travel and take pictures? But the more I traveled, the more food became important. And I think it probably is to every traveler, anyone who goes to another country, there's like, two things I really wanted to see, is like, what's the great monument and what's the great food that I've heard so much about. And so as I was traveling, the first country I went to was, the first country I really lived in, because for me, travel is more than just like a weekend holiday. It's more like go there and live there for a long period of time, whether that's a month or, or more. The first country I really traveled to that was for an extended period of time was Nepal. And I lived with a family for 4 months in Nepal, and with me and my wife, and they eat something pretty much every day. It's kind of like their standard breakfast, lunch, and dinner, which is called dal bhat. Okay, to preface this, it was in 2005. Nepal was in kind of the tail ends of a civil war at that period, and they didn't have any tourism. They used to be a tourism-rich country, and then have zero tourism during their civil war, because it was like on all the no-fly lists. It's like, do not visit this country, and their economy just tanked. And so when we were traveling there, I don't know if it was more so a tradition that they ate this meal every day, or if it was just that's what they got, because the economy crashed and there was, not a lot of money flowing around the country. So maybe food was scarce, but we ate this thing called dal bhat, and it was just rice and dal. Dal is like a soupy lentil soup that they would put on top of the white rice. And that's what we ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it made such an impact on me because it was the same. And I just would me and my wife would search out for anything that was other than dal bhat, because we ate it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for 4 months. So if we had something that was different, it was magical. And so ever since, we traveled to different countries after that, and it kind of put food into the forefront of our mind when we travel. It's like, let's go get some amazing whatever food, whether it's Japanese food or Korean food or Malaysian food or wherever we were at. It was like, let's go get some of that. And food became really important when we traveled, and it soon became something that I focused the camera onto, and I thought it was an important story or important part of whatever story I was trying to tell. And I never really built a portfolio until I moved to Oman, which is a little country kind of sandwiched between Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Iran, and Dubai, or the UAE to the north. And I met up with some amazing ad agencies there, because I wasn't really professionally a food photographer until 2010, 2011 or something like that. And it's because I started working with these ad agencies that were there in Oman. Like there were bigger ad agencies, but they were kind of like the local branch from that country. So it was like TBWA, which is like a huge ad agency, but it was like TBWA / the local company, which was, local to the country. And I met these great creative directors and art directors at the ad agencies, and, they became friends. And so I started building a portfolio kind of geared towards them and the clients that they had, which was mainly travel-esque kind of advertising, portraiture, a lot of like car advertisements or cell phone advertisements. I think I did supermarkets, but then every once in a while they'd get like the major hotel in the city, and it would be for their new menu or their new deal that they're doing for the holidays or something like that. And so it kind of led me to build a portfolio towards food, to appease these clients, because it was much more interesting to me than, say, portraiture or something like that. And so that's kind of how I built my food portfolio. And then I didn't really get much work with the ad agencies there because there wasn't a lot of clients. But my wife and I started getting work with a lot of the major hotels in the area, like Ritz-Carlton and Shangri-La and, the Chetty and stuff like that. And that led into building a more serious food portfolio and focusing on it more seriously. But it also had to do with education, I guess. It's a long story. I don't know if you have time to hear it, but yeah.
Absolutely do.
100%. So you also used to teach photography.
Yeah, well, that's the other half. Yeah, that's the other half of the story. Is I was a lecturer at a university there, and one of the biggest problems that students have in the Middle East when it comes to photography is really photographing the normal things that you would photograph in the West, like your friends or models or whatever, something outdoors even. Yeah, like half the year in the Middle East is the outdoors are completely inaccessible to people who are used to AC and comfortable lifestyle, because it's like, here's the sun and here's the Middle East, and here's the rest of the universe. It's so hot that you wouldn't want to step outside of, the studio to photograph. And so for me, teaching a class in that, I was kind of thinking, how do I teach this? Previously, lecturers would teach kind of a bunch of different subjects. They would teach tabletop, they would teach studio photography, they would teach travel-esque type of photography, but to little to no success. And I was like, well, if the students can't go outside, because it's hot, and they can't photograph models really because that's not culturally appropriate, what's left? And then I was like, well, what about food photography? Because you learn all the basics of lighting, composition. You learn pretty much everything with food photography, much like you would learn with any other kind of photography. You learn the basics. You learn how to light something, you learn how to compose something, you learn why certain lenses are more beneficial than others in certain situations, and you learn different camera angles and stuff like that. So I was thinking, why not create a course around food photography and then teach it to my students and see if that applies to the other classes. Like videography or basic general photography and stuff like that. And it seemed to work. They made really nice images, and it seemed like they could take those skills and transfer them to the next class, whether it be portraiture or video or something like that, because it would seem to have kind of a basis in lighting. And then during the later years, because I taught there for 8 years or something like that, 7 years. I think I was in the country for 8 years total, but it seemed like towards the end, when I was thinking about transitioning back to America, I was like, well, and I was doing a lot of online teaching at that time, because building online courses for students was really popular at university, still is, especially now. But back then it was still kind of in the trial stages. And I was like, well, let me film some of this stuff, some of these general lectures that I would do, like the basics of lighting or whatever, and let me film it. And then I'll have that. So every class will have that same video. And then I was like, well, maybe I'll put that on YouTube and see if people enjoy it. Turns out people did. And it kind of bridged that transition from the Middle East back to America. And I've tried to kind of keep it going since I've been back. So yeah.
There's an infinite amount to unpack there.
No, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think
no, sorry, yeah, go for it, yeah.
No, I mean, I think the clever thing about picking food photography in that situation in the Middle East is, I mean, it's brilliant because everybody's got access to food.
That's right. Yeah, it was a lot. Sometimes it was great. I mean, it was great because, yes, you're right. Everyone has access to food, female students, male students, which is something that we don't think about in the West, really. But it's very important there. Everyone has access to it. They can all come to the studio. They can bring their food. They can set up their tabletop, set up their lighting, and make some great images. What was funny is that what they would see, because there was really no cultural reference. And food photography, has a lot to do with culture. You look at an image, you look at the props, you look at the type of meals. Right now, it's very Western dominated, but so they would look at that as inspiration, and they would go, well, what do I have, in the Middle East? What can I make, to take a picture of if I wanted to make a meal or something like that? And they would come up with sometimes, very hilarious situations that that no one would ever eat, but they would think that it was something that we would eat, for sure. But yeah, it was great. It was a great experience, and oftentimes it resulted in some beautiful photography. So
yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I've come across a number of Facebook groups, like food photography Facebook groups, and a lot of those groups seem to be based in India. And by default, a lot of the dishes that I see, a lot of the photos, and they're of varying quality, I would say. But what's really interesting is to see a lot of those cultural influences in that photography. Where very often you look at it and you kind of, or I look at it and I kind of go, oh wow, I wouldn't even know where to start with that. Like, I don't know what the dish is, and secondly, a lot of the props that seem very, different to us in the West, will be difficult to get hold of. Yet it's got this like foreign beauty, or whatever you want to call it. It's like somehow unusual, and therefore very attractive.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but India has, from my experience Oman was about an hour flight from India. I think Doha was like an hour and a half or something like that. And we had a lot of Indian furniture stores in Oman.
Oh, right,
so
okay.
if you wanted to buy furniture for your house, like tables, and side tables and stuff like that, you could go to a store where they would import the furniture from India, and it was very popular. And so some of the first tabletops that I would photograph was from those stores, because they would make this beautiful wooden stuff that it looked a little bit rustic, but it was still usable, and they just had some beautiful stuff to work with as far as props and furniture and stuff like that. And so I would assume that in India there's probably even more access. I haven't been to India myself, but I'm assuming that there would be a lot more access to just amazing props, dishware, and stuff like that to include in your photography. And then you have the food. There's in India, there's like a million different regions, and each region has just a million different spices and vegetables and different types of dishes that they make. Yeah, to be a food photographer in India would just be amazing. It was actually one of my first inspirations. I saw an amazing travel story where a photographer went to India. She came back with just amazing images, and I was just so enamored by that photo story that it kind of inspired a whole host of my, I guess, aesthetic that you see now, probably, especially in my older work. Yeah.
A lot of Indian food, and actually India in general is incredibly colorful.
Yeah.
Color is a big deal over there, and they bring it into everything, absolutely everything. I've been to India several times, and that is a huge thing that I took away from that place. Is color is huge to everybody out there. And I didn't travel to too many different regions, so I don't know if that differs by region as well, but I suspect it does to some extent. But just to be surrounded by that is just something else, really something else. I
really find it amazing when you can have a culture that keeps a lot of, I guess, like in America, we go to what do we call them? Antique stores, but, so to have access, like we do in America, we have access to a lot of old stuff that people just saved, and now they sell at a higher price. And I'm sure it's the same in India, but there's just so much more of it over there, I would presume, just beautiful props and stuff to work with. So
does America have old stuff?
Well, I was just going to say, probably the kind of stuff that you pick up in an antique store over there is probably just, they sell the same stuff in the local IKEA over here.
It'd be brand new stuff for you guys.
Yeah. This is brand new. What, but it's 120 years old. Well, it is practically brand new.
you know, I've been looking at a lot of that stuff recently, funnily enough, and what ends up happening is a lot of people from America buy really old antiques from basically anywhere in Britain.
Well, they bought London Bridge, didn't
They
they?
hold it for a little bit and then they sell it back to us.
Really?
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
See, that's clever.
And they make so much
I like
extra
it.
profit on it. It's smart.
Absolutely.
Why wouldn't
And
you?
who says
wouldn't you?
Americans are dumb? Yeah.
It's perfect. You think about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
when I was the closest I got to India was Sri Lanka. I did a photo story there, and I also went there with my wife just on a vacation type thing. And I know Sri Lanka is very different than India, but they're still a little bit similar, and and at least from what I suspect from the art that I see and the people and stuff like that, and the lifestyle and just the stuff that they have there, just regular everyday stuff. I mean, would be treasures in any food photographer's, prop house or studio. So it was kind of really inspirational as a food photographer to go there and just be surrounded by all these things that you want to photograph and put on your table and make a picture with. It's just amazing, and the food is out of this world. So.
Yeah, because that's really, that's really a thing that I noticed when I first got interested in food photography was really that it's really this this play between the food itself and all the props that go around it. It's just, there's so much thought that needs to go in, not, the background or the tabletop itself, and every little thing, like the plate that the food is presented on, and everything else that goes around that. And in my own little way, when I tried to reproduce some of that at home, I actually found it really, what's the word? It was like food for the soul almost. The thing, when you come at it from a portrait photographer's point of view, and especially, I do a lot of headshots, for example, where things have to move and things are relatively quick. I find that whenever I shoot, tabletops and stuff like that, I'd like to take the time. I enjoy taking the time. I enjoy, moving things by like a fraction of an inch, and then, and trying things and moving stuff around until I've got it right. Is that something that draws you to food photography as well?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest difference between portraiture or travel when compared to food is that with food, you're creating the entire environment. Where travel, you might be creating a little piece of it, but it's still kind of rooted in whatever is surrounding you, whether it's the cityscape or the landscape or whatever. And so there's parts of the photo in a travel picture and a portrait that you can't change, and you have to just work with. And that becomes, I guess I was watching a previous podcast of yours. You're talking about car photography, and you're talking about how, like your whole idea changed when you realized that first you must just find the location and then put the car into that location. Yeah. So it's kind of the same with food photography, only all of it is in your mind. And then you have this blank kind of canvas, and you build this world within this little frame, whether it's a vertical or horizontal frame or whatever. And so everything, the lighting, everything from the props to the mood to the food, it all kind of has to work together to tell the story that you're trying to tell. But it all comes from up here, because there's a million different decisions that you can make. Like you're saying, you can move, things a fraction of an inch or a millimeter or whatever, and it, could effectively change the entire story that you're trying to tell. Yeah. And so that's an attraction, but it's also very difficult. That's probably the hardest part with food photography, is getting everything working together, I guess, from the props to the lighting to the food, all of it kind of working harmoniously to tell one singular story, And whereas with travel, you can kind of just, I found a great location, let me just stick something, whatever that something is, depending on who's paying you, whatever that something is, to put into that photograph. And I think I think if you're a travel, this was me at least. When I was a travel photographer, I wanted to control everything. And as a food photographer, I would love it if there was pieces that were completely out of my control, and I could just be like, yeah, that's how it is, you know. So yeah, I think I can't remember what your original question is, but that was my take on it.
Do you find, you know, now you've been photographing food for so long, and you know, having to come up with that creative idea of what to surround that food with, do you find it difficult now to keep coming up with something that's fresh? You know, getting inspiration for how this plate of food is going to look different to the one I did 5 years ago, you know, or last week or whatever.
Yeah, that's really difficult because it is very repetitive. No matter, even if you change the props, like composition, for example, is really repetitive, and it can oftentimes make you think like you're doing something wrong because you're doing something that's so very similar to something that you've done before. And that's a feeling that you don't really get with other types of photography, unless you revisit the same place over and over again, I guess. But with food photography, I think, at least for me, it's kind of goes in a progression of styles. I want to say it's like a progression of styles that I rotate and rotate back out of, and then rotate back into again. So maybe like for months and months and months, I'll be very rustic, I guess, or very traditionalistic, where everything in the scene is very natural, lots of wood or whatever you would find in your typical kitchen, you know. And then I'll go kind of commercial, where it would be like a solid color, like really bright and poppy, and it'd be very minimalistic, you know. And then I'll go back to wanting to fill the frame with all my little knickknacks and stuff, you know, and making the composition completely full. And there's no negative space because that annoys, you know, food photographers. And so it's something like that, you know, where that kind of keeps your interest, I guess, you know, changing it up, going from, you know, I guess editorial to more commercial, back to editorial to more, you know, abstract or something like that. And so you can kind of change the styles of food photography to keep your interest. But yeah, you're right, because you're confined to, you know, a rectangular frame or whatever you shoot, the format that you shoot in, you're confined to that composition. So there's only so many ways that you can move a circular plate or a square plate or a cutting board around the frame before it's very similar to a previous photo that you made. I mean, there's probably only like, I don't know, 10 compositions that you can do in food photography. So if you're looking for that kind of variety in your work, then you're kind of going to be disappointed, I think, in food photography. But if you're looking to tell stories, or if you're looking to tell something about, or if you're looking to say something about a specific genre, then I think there's infinite, you know, possibilities in that aspect.
Do you find that your change between, just to give the couple of examples there, you said between sort of the rustic style versus the commercial sort of solid color sort of style, do you find that you change that just off your own back because you want to do something slightly different for a few months? Or are you reacting to what is kind of popular at that time, and what you know, just for argument's sake, what hotel restaurants are going to want?
Yeah, I mean, that's really difficult to say. The artist in me says I want to follow, you know, I just follow whatever, you know, whatever fate leads me to. But, you know, everyone has to make money. So it's like whatever you think is going to make you money, really, as a photographer. I've been lucky to find a niche, I think, in kind of the stuff that I do, and I don't even know what it is that I do, per se. You know, I don't know what really people find attractive about my work. But some people seem to find it attractive, and so I keep doing more of that, I guess, because that's where the money comes from. And I know other photographers that shoot completely abstract, completely commercial work, solid colors, hard light, all that kind of stuff, very geometric shapes. And I love that stuff. I think it's fantastic. And that's all they shoot. And it's very the polar opposite of generally the stuff that I shoot. And yeah, they probably make more money than I do. So do you follow the money, or do you follow what you're passionate about? I think it's kind of a split in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have to do that as a starving artist. You have to kind of find where the paycheck's coming from, and then build your portfolio to that.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wondered this, actually, particularly with food photography, especially when you work, for clients. I've always wondered how tight the client brief actually is. In one hand, because because you could think on one hand, well, the client books you because they like your style and that's what they're after, or on the other hand, it could be like a client books you because they have a very specific idea and they know that you can pull that one off. So that's why I'm always wondering, like, how tight is the client brief, or does it vary from project to project, or from client?
I would say it varies a little bit depending on who's hiring you. Oftentimes, it's not the client. Like in my experience, at least, it's rarely the client. It's usually an art director from an agency, or a creative director from an agency, and they are looking at very differently than the client is looking at. They're pitching you to the client because they like whatever they see in your work. They think it's special, and they think that it could be used for project A or project B or whatever. And so I think this kind of goes back to when I was saying I was like an advertisement photographer. I was doing food photography at that time, but nobody cared. I was getting work because I guess the friends that I had in the ad agencies saw promise in the work that I was doing enough to trust me with a portrait shoot or a travel campaign. If that makes sense.
Sure.
They looked at my go, oh, okay, you can light this food photograph. So obviously you could probably light a person on a cliff somewhere. And I think that's where I got some of my work earlier on. And now I think it's more heavily in the people who are approaching me like my style of food photography, and they hire me specifically for that style. Sometimes I get approached by people who go, oh, I love, obviously you're a great food photographer. Let's see if you can do some projects in more of a commercial, I guess more of an abstract kind of commercial sense. But I would say most of the time they hire me because my style aligns with the project that they're working on,
Just to get slightly...
Hold on a second. Sorry, there's like the fire brigade is outside my window right now.
Oh, that's cool. We've interviewed people in New York before. It's
my studio is right next to the firehouse. Perfectly planned for a YouTube studio.
Just to get kind of slightly behind the scenes, because these are sort of questions that that we've had, and I know we've been asked before as well. Is take those art directors who are pitching you to their clients for whichever project it is. How what's the easiest way to? How do those art directors know about you in the first place? How did you get on their radars?
That's a good question. It used to be that I would send out promo, like promo cards. I would send out promo cards. I'd send out promo emails. When I first came back to the States, well, okay. If you're living outside of the States, when I was living outside of the States, in the Middle East and in Asia, you could just walk into the places and be like, hey, I'm looking for the creative director. I'm a photographer. And you would get a meeting. That's how I did it. And I'd get a meeting and I would show my portfolio. In the States, and probably in England as well, you can't do that. They have security. So, so when I first came back to the States, and even before I left the States, I used something called agency access, which is like a company that, has a list, like an ongoing list of all the art directors and creative directors and janitors at every ad agency known to man and every publication, known to man. And they would keep an updated list, and then you would pay money, you would use that list, and you'd send out an email, or a promo card or whatever. And so when I first came back to the States, my initial thought was like, oh, I just had to go back to agency access because they were around before I left the States and they're still around, and you pay them a bunch of money and you get this list, and then you just work, your fingers to the bone, creating emails and with a little portfolio saying, hey, look at my stuff. And then you would use their list and send it out. But now, like, I haven't used them in probably 3 or 4 years. Now everything is coming through, I don't know what. I would say Instagram, but I'd also say YouTube as well, which is really kind of strange to me because it's kind of the first time where I've had, in the last couple of years, I've had at least, I'd say 5 or 6 clients say, hey, we saw your video on YouTube. Can you do something for us?
Huh.
Or I even had one client said, hey, I was looking how to do this on YouTube and I ran into your video. Could you consult, or could you do a project for me? Could you consult me how to make my team better or whatever? So this is something very new, like having that experience. And same with Instagram, having your Instagram profile be your portfolio is something new to me. I mean, I've been a working photographer since 2005-ish, 2006, so, and I've been outside of America. So I've also been outside of the whole kind of social sphere of what's going on in the West, and kind of been doing things old school for most of my career. So coming back to America and having your Instagram and having your YouTube channel be probably a very important part to your marketing sphere as a photographer is something new to me. But it's definitely something that I would say the vast majority of my clients, they've ran into me on Instagram, or they've seen a video on my YouTube channel, and then they went to my website and they found out my kind of professional work, and then they contact me and say, hey, can you do this, job or whatever. So I would say that's how they run into me now. But still active promotion. Like, I still send out emails on a regular basis to like art directors and stuff. The problem with those lists is that, like with agency access and other lists like that have art directors and creative directors, is that the lists aren't instantly updated. There's a lag. Some people might change jobs and they don't update the list, and then you're just emailing no one. And most of the time, like, I've talked to my agent about this. Most of the time, those lists, the emails that you send go to like nowhere. They go to like, an empty inbox. They filtered out that email. They found a way to filter those emails out like 10 years ago or something like that. So, yeah. So I would say most of the time it just comes through direct messaging of people, and they find me through Instagram and YouTube and then my portfolio.
It's interesting. So it shows how important whatever you have out there is, because people will find it in some way, and it needs to show what it is that you actually do and what you can do. But do you also find that aside from new clients, you get the same art director coming back time and time again because he really likes your work and pushing it forward?
One of the most things that makes me the happiest is when a art director, a creative director, or someone from an agency who hasn't hired me before but still emails me about future prospective jobs or whatever that they're working on. I think that's the most gratifying, I guess, because I'm still on their radar. Even though that I haven't worked with them, and they contact me and say, oh, hey, I know we haven't worked together, but I have another job that just came down the pipe, and you popped up in my head. I think anytime that you pop up in their head, it's probably the best feeling ever, that you're still on their radar, even if you haven't worked with them. But yeah, of course, if you worked with them before and they come back, that just says you did a great job. And yeah, that doesn't happen to me very often. But I mean, not that because I don't do great jobs. It just, the thing about photography, I think a lot of people don't understand about being a professional photographer, not just like a Instagrammer or YouTuber or whatever, but agents, like people from agencies, creative directors and art directors, they're looking for not just like a square hole to match or a square peg to match a square hole. They're looking for something that is so specifically matching that hole that there could be no other photographer other than the one that they chose. And so they might have like 10 photographers that they're reaching out for a singular job. And all those photographers, if you were like put them on a wall, I'm sure you wouldn't be able to tell them apart, but they're looking at the very finest details that would make or break that job. And so once you get I've always said this to people, is like, there's a level, it seems like there's a level. Once you get to that level, everyone else is in that level with you. And so I think a lot of times people think that there's like a staircase in photography, and you start out at the bottom, and as you move up and you move up and move up, and people think that there's going to be like a platform where you get to where you're the only person on that platform. And that's not the case. No. Every platform you get to in that staircase, there's also 10 million other people on that same platform at the same time, and they're all moving up the staircase with you,
Yeah, so I think it's not too dissimilar from like portraiture or headshot photography, for example, where you can like when you get to the level where you can really produce like a really high class headshot, for example, you'll immediately find do you think like you've really got the lighting dialed down, and you can really connect with your subject and all that kind of stuff. And you very quickly realize that that's actually a given at that level. That just puts you on the same level with X amount of other people, because that's just the way you need to be at, in order to shoot at that level. And that's, I think that's probably the same. But what advice would you give someone who is, wanting to get into food photography? Maybe somebody who has an affinity for food or loves cooking and photography and so on and so forth, and somebody who's thinking of really specializing in food photography and getting into that industry. What sort of advice would you give somebody like that?
I would say before you get into commercial food photography, maybe do a recon of your local area and say, is there any clients in my local area that I could work for? If I was, if you're just getting into food photography, I would ask yourself, okay, if I was the best food photographer, who would I be working for in my area? And if there's no one to work for, then maybe I would reconsider. That as a food photographer, you're really restricted. You're restricted by your subject. If your subject doesn't look absolutely amazing, then it's going to be very difficult to make great work that will get seen in the commercial space, I guess, if that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, you can cook your stuff yourself. And a lot of people do that, and a lot of people make that transition and they become really great chefs. And they also happen to take pictures of their work. And then, those pictures get recognized, and then they maybe get commercial work because of that. And that's one avenue to start. Another avenue is kind of the way I did it was, okay, I'm surrounded by all these 5-star hotels because I live in this touristy area. And so there's opportunities there that if I build a portfolio, I might be able to shop that portfolio around to my local seen, and then, get some clients and make some better work, and then, be able to sell that better work to, other areas. So there's that avenue too. So that's what I'm talking about. If you have, if you happen to live in a space where there are already some maybe lower end, easier access clients to get into, then it's perfect. But if there is none, you have to, I think this is, I don't know who said this, but you have to really love your subject to be a good photographer of that subject.
Yeah.
And I think if you have no passion for cooking, you have no passion for food, then you don't really have much business being in food photography, because everyone that you're going to meet has this, extreme passion for food, and as they should. Your prop stylists, your food stylists, your photographers, your creative directors, everyone has a passion for food in that space. So if you're the one that doesn't, then you're kind of the oddball out. And I think photographers can really fall into that trap, because we kind of, find interest in everything, so.
Yeah. I thought this a lot of the time. We have a lot of like chicken shacks here, like we call them dirty chicken shops. It's like, they're little like independent like chicken places, and a lot of the time when you look at their menu photos,
I have the best story.
They are abysmal.
Yeah.
I don't know how to sell any food, and I really want to know who shoots
right.
That's why it's freaking terrible.
On that, right? So there is a chain here, small chain, but they're all over the country, and they sell fish and chips, basically. All right. Don't mention who.
We're not naming.
No, we're not going to name them. No, we're not going to name them.
I'm trying to think
there's a fish in the title of their name. That's all I say. And if you go into their shops and you look at their, they usually have it on those lit up kind of boards, if you like, a bit like Burger King or McDonald's, all of that kind of stuff, right? And they had their photos were done in such a way that they took photos of the chips and separate photos of the fish.
So chips, by the way, are fries.
Are fries, yeah,
yeah,
and composited it together,
right?
Very badly. But that's what they did. It's like, all right, fine. Looks awful, but fine. But they did add a separate photo for small and large fish and chips. Do you know what they did?
Or just made the chips
They just
larger?
zoomed in.
Excellent.
That's all they did. They zoomed in and made the fish that bit bigger. There's more. It gets better. The one shop that I'm thinking of right now, which is close to us, is they did something called a Masala Fish. Right, and they cooked it in the batter had some kind of masala sauce or spices or something like that in there. And what what they did was they photoshopped the fish to make it red rather than actually photographing a separate masala fish, and then did a small and a large version of that as well. It was the worst thing I've ever seen.
See, the thing that fascinates me is like when you go to like a burger chain, say McDonald's or Burger King or whatever, and you look at the photos on the menu, and of course the stereotypical thing is you get your food, you order the Whopper cheese, double Whopper or whatever, and then you open the thing and you open your box and you go like, that doesn't look anything like it does in the photo. I find that fascinating because my mind immediately works like, ooh, I wonder how they did that. Yeah. I wonder how they made it look like on the photo and stuff. So I'm immediately in like, did they use glycerin on the tomato or the whatever it is?
So you didn't go full Michael Douglas.
Well, but so I'm immediately thinking I'm fascinated by that. But what fascinates me even more is like when you go around to one of these like little dirty chicken shops around here, that's what they call them. And you look at the photographs on their menus, like on the posters in the shop window, and you kind of go, you didn't even try. Like, you didn't even try to make it look good. What is wrong with you people? Are you trying to sell anything? Yeah. But so I think, part of what fascinates me about food photography, and that's also like, food in terms of food and beverage photography as well, is I'm really fascinated by all the things you can do to make something look fresh and attractive and and whatever else. Because I like the sort of behind the scenes, the technical stuff, So
Yeah.
like, how much of the food that you shoot relies on that kind of in frame enhancement, if you want to call it that?
I mean, that's a good question. I want to say it's like 50-50, really.
Mm-hmm.
To go back to the McDonald's things, actually, there's a great YouTube video. McDonald's produced their own YouTube video of a photo shoot because I think they get asked this question a lot. Why does their photographs look so different than what happens, in your bag or whatever, what you get in your bag? Which I guess a lot can be blamed on the steam that's emanated from the sandwich and encapsulated in the cardboard box or whatever they put that thing in, the burger in, which kind of melts everything together. But they show a really great behind the scenes on how they do their photo shoots, which is fascinating. But that being said, for me, it depends on the client, really, and the type of food. I guess most of the food shoots that I would do for clients rely on two things: either spritzing with water or brushing some olive oil or whatever your oil of choice is on whatever the subject is. And not a lot of like past that. If you're going to do a beverage shot, for example, you're going to be spritzing it and you're going to be adding probably glycerin, and most likely there'll be fake ice. Like, I can actually show you some, but like acrylic ice, or they make a resin version of ice, which can be homemade and I think looks better anyways. And it also floats like ice. Yeah. I can show you something, but maybe in a second. But anyways, yeah, so there's that. And with drink photography, it's a whole different beast. And I think that it's really important that people separate, I guess, food photography and break it up into its little compartments, because each little type of food photography requires its own separate skills in lighting and photography and styling. It's so very vastly different, I guess a comparison would be maybe in portraiture, I guess would probably be a good comparison. You have your high school portraits, you have your model portraits, and then you have your supermodel portraits, and then you have your environmental portraits, all these different types of portraiture that basically require the same kind of photographer with the same set of skills, but each one is so vastly unique that they require very specialized skills to master each one of them. Like an environmental portraiture compared to a fashion, portraiture would be so vastly different. It's the same kind of with editorial food photography and commercial beverage photography for that, for that matter. Like commercial beverage photography, there's nothing, really real in that kind of photography. Everything is plastic or glass or resin or glycerin or water spritz or something like that. So with my kind of photography, I would say it mostly relies on real food, and very light styling. The styling happens in the cooking process. It's cooked in a specific way to make it look beautiful. Like the grill marks are impeccable because the cook or the food stylist, spent time and dedication in honing their craft and making those grill marks amazing, and also with food photography, just like any commercial kind of photography, there's a whole team of people that specialize, and each one of those specializations requires, a lot of dedication in that skill. Like there's the prop stylist, and the prop stylists are dedicated to having a unique eye and vision to amazing props and amazing styles and props that differ from each other because they tell different stories about the subject, you know. And then the food stylist, usually food stylists are trained chefs. Usually they went to school for it, or they have a lot of experience in cooking. And then they also know how to cook and how to prepare food for the camera. And then you have people like digital techs who handle everything that has to do with the photo going from the camera to the computer and the image from the computer going to the client. And then you have the photographer, and each one of those has like their different skill sets and stuff like that. So, you know, food photography can be completely 100% fake. And I would actually say that's where it's going. You know, most commercial food photography is going into the 3D realm, like car photography and stuff like that, to 100% natural, which is like what you see on Instagram with a lot of the food bloggers and stuff like that. I would also say you have to redefine food photography, because it is no longer commercial 100%. Like other areas of photography, there is an entire realm of food photography that is 100% not commercial.
Yeah.
And I would say it's a lot like nature photography, or, you know, a lot like that, you know.
I definitely do not enjoy the kind of, you know, the sort of the mobile phone shots where people go like, look what I've had for dinner. And you get this thing as you go, oh God, why? It's like, there's no need for that.
As an educator, also I also have to make a discernment between actually in all photography, you have to make that discernment. Like, what is the end purpose for this photograph? Where is it planning on being displayed?
Yeah.
And that really, you know, makes the difference between, it's only supposed to be for Instagram for my food blog. So it doesn't have to be that spectacular of an image, you know?
And that is exactly like portraiture, especially when you take headshot, you know, photography as an example. You know, and that's completely an absolute distinction. Sometimes, you know, you create a portrait or a headshot of somebody, and you know that's going to be on a billboard. Another time, you create something, you know, for an email signature that's 180 by 180 pixels, and the effort and the precision and everything else that goes into one or the other, it differs wildly, of course. You know, depending on what the purpose is.
And that's just expanded so much recently. You know, back in the day, it was like you took pictures because you took pictures, or you took pictures as a job. And now it's like everyone can make pictures and also make a little bit of money. So there's like the whole gray area between professional photographers who solely work commercially and your average day person with a camera. You know, there's a huge gradation now, where there wasn't in the past, I guess, you know.
Yeah. How does it practically work for you on a shoot like the one you were just describing, where you've got, you know, your kind of, I'm going to call them food techs for now, right? You know, the majority of photographers end up working on their own, you know, out there most of the time. But when you're on a shoot like that, where you've got people who specialize in those different areas you were talking about, who has the final say at that moment? Is it you as the photographer? Or I'm guessing when you've got a team like that around you, the creative director or the art director is available, but perhaps they're not there on the shoot. How does that practically work for you? Does pre-production happen for you so everybody's on the same page before you get to the shoot?
Yeah, okay, so that's a huge question. Yes. Ultimate responsibility is on the photographer.
Okay.
But
there we go.
Ultimate decision is with the client, of course. So ultimate responsibility falls, you know, if there's somebody to be responsible for the error of the shoot, then it's the photographer. But the ultimate responsibility relies on whoever's managing the shoot, whether it's the client or the creative director or the art director. However, as a photographer, you should rely on your team. I mean, if you have a team, you know, and your team is very defined by like saying, this is the prop director and these are your responsibilities. This is the food stylist. These are your responsibilities. You're the digital tech. These are your responsibilities. You're the assistant, blah, blah, blah. And as the photographer, you're kind of managing these people and hopefully building a good team around you. But if you get thrown into a team, like say you work for a client and that client has an in-house food stylist and an in-house prop stylist, which happens, especially with larger clients, you get thrown into that team and then you kind of, I think, you have the creative direction as the photographer to say, oh, no, that doesn't look good on camera. But you have to rely on their expertise because they're the professional in that specific field. Unless you're everything, you have to rely on their expertise. And I think then the ultimate responsibility lies on the creative director or the art director, whoever's managing the shoot. But yes, there should be a ton of pre-production. I'm not saying there should be a ton of pre-production. Every final, little minute detail should be sussed out in the pre-production to make your life as the photographer and managing, multiple people easiest on set. I mean, ideally, you walk into the shoot, you go click, and that's it. Because everything is so pre-production, all the pre-production is so fantastic that everything is done. And then you just push the button and bam, you walk off, you throw the camera, you're like, I'm finished. What is that? Like Mike Myers, like that movie where he's like, snap, snap, snap. Yeah. He throws his camera and done.
Click, mic drop.
I think exactly. you gotta be Joel Grimes for that to happen.
Right.
You just walk in, that's it. Yeah.
I mean, I do a lot of pre-production. So like for my shoots, even the smaller shoots, I'll draw out each this is my typical pre-production is I'll draw out or sketch out, whether it's pen to paper or it's on my tab or whatever. I'll draw out the composition and I'll try to draw out the plates, the cups, the food, the light. Even I'll give the prop shadow, I'll just sketch out the shadow so I know where the lighting is coming from. And that helps, just those simple sketches, whether they're good or not, those simple sketches will help the food stylist understand what's going on. It'll help the client understand before the shoot even gets to going. And it'll clarify things for them, and they'll either say, yes, that all looks fantastic, or, oh, instead of this here, maybe we'll put that there, And so it helps kind of generate the ideas before the shoot happens. And then when you get the shoot, the big things are, did this thing cook well? Not your photography, so to speak. So it kind of like eliminates all the technical aspects of the shoot, and it allows you to just focus on the creative. If you draw out everything and everyone understands what is going on in the shoot, when you get to the shoot, you set up your camera, you set up your lights, all that stuff is taken care of, and the food comes to the table. Most of the time, if you've done it right, all of your props are in their perfect positions already before the food comes. All of the little, the little side stories, maybe it's a shot of like the perfect pasta dish. And off to the side of the pasta dish is a little scene of somebody who had just chopped some parsley, or something like that. And so you have things like cutting board, the knife, the parsley, all the little chopped pieces of parsley, all the little pieces of mess and stuff and crumbs and things around the table. All of that is 100% taken care of. And then the food, the main dish, comes into frame. And all that's left is just pushing that last final button of that last trigger to fire the last shot. And then in a perfect scenario, that is it. Food, gets taken off the table and you tear down and you go to the next shot on the list. And that's the perfect case scenario. However, nothing happens in a perfect world, I guess. And so, you might set all that stuff up and go, you know what? Actually, this dish looks better from another angle or something like that. Or it looks better if we remove this other stuff. But I think all the pre-production kind of allows you, it allows you like a buffer to say, okay, this is what we planned. It's not working. Let me remove this. Okay, it works better, now. And so you don't have to, remake the dish and all that stuff. Or it allows you to see the mistakes that might possibly happen before the dish is even made. The worst thing is to waste the cook's time. Whoever's preparing the food, the worst thing is to waste their time, because it's like a restaurant. You don't want to back up the orders, because that's going to affect the next photo and the next photo and the next photo. Most of the time shoots have at least 5 or 6 photos per day. On a healthy day rate, you want to kind of block out 5 to 6 photos to be completed in that 8-hour day. It's about 45 minutes a photo. And that kind of comes with putting all the stuff on the table, organizing your compositions that you've already pre-production, drawn out and stuff like that. It still takes time. It takes time to move the lighting into the perfect scenario. And while you're doing that, they're cooking the food. And if you don't do the pre-production, then there's not enough time to create this environment, this entire scene, this entire story in your head on the spot while they're cooking the food. Now you have the pressure of them, like, okay, I got 15 minutes until the steak is done. You got to come up with an idea, and you're sitting there going, oh, I don't know what to do. Should I throw a cutting board in there? I don't know, and then you come up with bad photography. And I think oftentimes you see a food photograph where the props don't really match the story, or the lighting doesn't match the story. There's just something off, and you're like, why is that there? That's most likely because it was a mistake in the pre-production. Whether there was no pre-production or there was a mistake in the pre-production somewhere along the lines, everything in that photograph should fit the story. And if it doesn't, it's because it was on the fly or it was a bad pre-production.
I tell you what's really interesting about this for me is actually this sort of kind of confirms something that I experienced during the last lockdown. So I make a mean guacamole. It's based on a recipe that I got from Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top, and it's a mean guacamole. But there's one problem, and there was one at one time during the lockdown where I decided I had to photograph. I don't know why. Was it a little thing that we did? I don't
remember now.
Anyway, so I made created this this flat lay with this guacamole. But the problem with that guacamole is that when you first make it, it has this vibrant color and the sheen to it, and it looks great. And it's like a gazillion and a half of different stuff that goes in it. But the problem with it is that within minutes, it starts to go brown. And so I knew that I didn't have long. I basically knew that I had to make the thing, throw it in my set, and shoot it. Because if I waited for too long and I was, if I started fuffing around with like things on the side or whatever, then I would lose it and it'd be it. So I kind of worked it very similar to what you're describing, in a sense that I put the set together first, and I kind of thought about all the ingredients that are in there, and I had like little tubs with like different ingredients on the side, and to create the whole composition and the whole thing. And then the last thing literally that had to come was the actual bowl with the guacamole. It went straight in, a little bit of stuff on the top, and click the button, and that was it. But all of the pre-production really made that possible. Would have never been possible to do it the other way around and start with the food and then build everything around that. So
that is the ticket. That's the entire reason for pre-production, is because, especially with food photography. I mean, pre-production is important in every area of photography or filmmaking, right? But with food photography, there's an actual need for pre-production, and that's that the food is going to die like within 5 minutes. Like with guacamole, you can add a little lemon juice and it'll preserve the amount of time. Yeah,
I did that.
But I always say that your last picture is your best picture, because in food photography, the last picture is usually when the food comes into the scene.
Yes.
So it's always, when you're cycling through like, the 100 pictures that you took during the day or whatever, it's always the last one that's going to be the best one. So you might as well just not even look at the 99 previous images.
Yeah. And it's all the like, the lighting setups and the composition bits and like, and I like, I don't know, I like busy flat lays. It's just what I like doing. This is a lot of, we've talked about this on the podcast a lot. We, whether it's environmental portraits or whatever it is, I always like to work on a set. I like to spend hours putting a set together, putting things into position, like, dirtying stuff up. And then the actual shoot is like done in 20 minutes, but the pre-production just took like 3 hours. We did an environmental portrait with a Ferrari a few months ago, and it was exactly like that. It was basically, it took hours to put the set together and put everything in place. And then the actual shoot itself was over very quickly, because everything was already, we just had to put the person in. That was the final thing, Yeah,
I think as a photographer, that's how you should think about it, because, let's say it does take hours for pre-production, and then the client rolls up, the Ferrari's there, you snap the picture, you're like, I'm finished. That kind of only makes you look more of a professional, because you're like, they're like, oh, wow, this guy's got a great image in like 20 minutes. It's super easy.
Yeah.
And they don't notice he did 3 days of pre-production. He drew out the compositions. You planned everything to the T, prior to that. They don't see any of that. Yeah. I mean, somebody along the line is going to see that, but, the head chef or the food and beverage manager on a food shoot, they don't know that really. They just walk in and go, wow, he just took a picture in 5 minutes. It looks beautiful. Yeah, I could do that with my phone, no problem.
Yeah, the funny thing about that particular shoot was that the client, so to say, was expecting it to be, quite a sort of a luxury type shoot, and when we arrived on this,
they just wanted to hang out. They're like, darn it, you're too fast. We wanted to hang out.
Yeah, no, it was like, we arrived on the set or on the location, and what we didn't know, and this is, our mistake was in a sense that we hadn't visited the location beforehand. But basically, the images that we got before the shoot were very clean, clean walls, clean floor, clean lines. We kind of thought, okay, well, we can do this. It could be cool, and make it quite stylish and very like a very clean looking image. But when we got there, we realized that what they hadn't shown us on the photographs beforehand was that the other side of the place was like full of dirty, like tools and like dust and immediately I went, right, let's change tact here. What we should really be doing would be a lot cooler, would be to put this luxury car into the dirtiest of environments you could possibly imagine, like the dirty, oily old,
the contrast.
garage. Yeah, contrast, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the client, although he loved the idea, he obviously had prepared himself with very kind of upmarket clothing. But we found a really
slippers.
Yeah, and slippers. What's the driving shoes?
That's actually the same in food photography. It's a nice little trick. Clean background with a messy subject.
Right.
And a messy background with a clean subject. It always seems to work because of the contrast.
Yeah, juxtaposition is the thing.
Juxtaposition. Yeah, juxtaposition.
And so but as we were pulling out all these old tools and this dusty stuff, we found this old raggedy overall, which is like covered in paint and like it was
grease and oil
and everything. And we just went, perfect.
Put it
now,
on.
We just have to get him into this thing. It would look great. But he was a good sport, actually. He played along.
Of course he was.
Yeah, it was cool. And I mean, the resulting image, I like it. It's kind of cool. It turned out a lot better than we had originally planned. And it was actually just because we changed our plans at the last minute.
It's by far the best image we could have got in that particular location.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been it. I mean, luckily this wasn't a commercial client in the sense that this was meant to be for a particular campaign, so we had the flexibility. It would have been different if that had been a very definitive brief for something very specific, which it wasn't.
And we've talked about this before on the podcast that I'm a big fan of pre-production. Massive fan of planning and making sure everybody knows what they're doing, what we're going in to achieve, why we're achieving what we're achieving. So everybody's on the same page. Anyway, but having said that, you need the ability, once you arrive there, to switch and change and be flexible and agile, to go, you know what?
I've got a better idea.
You know those 2 days of things we just did? Yeah, still important. Actually, a lot of that we can take through, but throw that half of that away for a minute. This is how we should be going about it, because it's going to end up to be a better shot. And at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want the best shot possible.
Of course. But I think there's elements in the pre-production process that no matter how much you change it, you're always going to bring some of that pre-production into that shot. A lot of people call me like a tripod Nazi, but because there's like a huge debate on whether you should use a tripod or not in food photography. Like some people are like, oh, I like the freedom to move around the table and find the best angle. And I'm like, well, if you really thought about the subject and you really you did a lot of pre-pro and you drew out your composition, then you should know where your camera is going to be, because that's going to be where that subject looks the best. So you can use a tripod then, right? You don't have to walk around your table. And for me, and this is kind of like overarching with all photography, for me, I like the style to the camera. So like the camera's fixed and I make the frame to that. Even like with nature photography, I'll use a tripod, a lot of times. And it's because I'm thinking about all the little pieces, the corners of the frame and all that stuff. And I want to make sure everything in the frame is copacetic. But I also want to save time. Like with food photography, I use the tripod because if I move the camera angle, the lighting's going to change, the reflection's going to change, where the shadows fall will change, how the props look, because it's a 2D frame, it's a 2D perspective, and you're trying to make a 3D picture, so, how the props look will change if you move the camera angle and all that kind of stuff. And so I like to suss that out in the pre-production, and then I can use a tripod, and then I don't have to worry about camera shake or shutter speed or anything like that, But yeah, always be open to everything just completely being thrown away and starting fresh on set. But that only comes with practice, and you can only do that if you have the skills to do that. That's what separates between being a photographer, like a pro photographer, and an amateur photographer, is being able to think on your feet, I guess, during that small window of time that you have, to please the client during the shoot.
And that's a combination of experience and actually having learned your craft, in the years preceding, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, with experience comes the ability to
break the rules.
Well, to break the rules under pressure. This is the thing, because that's a real thing. I think, when you work, and whether your client is there, whether not director is there looking over your shoulder, or whether your client is nowadays very often like online, monitoring what's happening. That's a certain amount of pressure. That I think you need to have the experience to be able to function under that. At least for me, that's certainly true.
That's totally right. Experience breeds confidence, right? And if you need to be confident in that situation to just make the change, because you know what it is you're going to do, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. Yeah. That's okay.
Well, there's the monetary pressure too. I mean, a lot of times people don't think about that with a shoot, with a professional shoot. You have a lot of money. A lot of money is at stake on a professional shoot, especially a food photography. I mean, food photography shoots are probably the least, but it's still a lot of money going into that kind of shoot. You have the day rates of the food stylist, the prop stylist, the client themselves, the food that's being thrown into the bin after the shoot. There's that money, and sometimes that can be a lot of money. There's your rate, whatever else is perishable, time, all those things are perishable, and if you mess up a shoot, that could be a lot of money. You should have insurance for that, for sure.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
it could potentially, it could potentially cost you more than you bargained for, in the end.
Yes.
So that's the thing. I want to talk to you about your stop motion work as well, because I mean, I love stop motion. I think we can speak for Nick as well. But there's been some really interesting stuff that I've seen you do that I haven't really quite worked out how that worked. There's
Like
one
what?
particular one where there's a cherry and it goes into a cell phone.
Yeah.
And then it goes into a drink. How the hell?
Yeah. Okay.
How did that work?
It's a really simple one, actually. That one I did for Samsung.
Yeah.
So I recently just got sponsored by Samsung, which was huge. It's huge for me. And I know people that they're like, oh, he's always talking about sponsors. But this is what pays me to do Instagram and YouTube. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on there at all. I'd just be focusing 100% on commercial work and clients and stuff. So I am a starving artist for sure. So Samsung sponsored me, and this is absolutely huge this year. And they wanted me to do an Instagram post. And for me, I'm not really one to just take a picture of myself with some gear. I'm not a celebrity. Who cares if I'm holding the phone? So I wanted to make something all the posts that I do for Samsung. I want to make sure that they're creatively inspiring, that people photographers would watch them and go, oh, that's kind of cool. How did he do that? So that's all of my ads that I do for my clients on YouTube and social media. I want to make sure that they have there's a bar there where it's that work is kind of creative, I guess, more than just be holding the cell phone and some earbuds in my head or whatever. So I thought, well, they had a summer special. That was the idea. It's music for the summer or something like that. They wanted to promote that you can get free music if you signed up to Samsung or something like that or whatever. And so I was thinking, okay, how do I make this summer vibe with a phone and have it relate to food? And so I thought, well, I could do a stop motion where it involved the drink. And then I had to figure out how to put the phone in there because that's the product. So I was like, well, what happens if the cherry, because with stop motion, I'm always looking for a character. And so the cherry is going to be my character. And I was thinking, okay, it could jump into my scene and jump through the phone and up the glass and into drink and pop the umbrella. It's going to the beach. The cherry is going to the beach and the beach just happens to be this awesome cocktail. Okay. So that was the premise behind the thought process there. And the way I did it was I photographed the phone. So all of the stop motion before it touches the phone is from a camera. And then I was thinking originally that I could just change my camera's position and photograph the cherry going up the glass and then superimpose that onto the phone because it would be higher resolution, than if I was to take a phone picture or something like that. But then that wasn't working because I don't have a lens that's the same perspective as the natural lens on the camera, on the phone camera, And so I was thinking okay, if I can film this or, photograph this as a stop motion up until the point where it reaches the phone, then maybe I could try to photograph it with the phone camera after that point. And so it's actually 2 stop motions, I guess. So it's one till it reaches the phone. And then after it reaches the phone, it's a stop motion from the phone, from the camera of the phone.
Yeah.
And then I blended it together into one piece. And I made the cherry move with a wire, and I just photoshopped the wire out. So I took the cherry and I poked it onto the wire, and then I just held it in my hand. And so as it jumps up into the phone and then up the glass, it's all with a wire. And I just photoshopped the wire out. But there's also some other little things there that I did. Like I photoshopped. There's a little circular bit where it shows you the preview of the image on the phone.
Mhm.
And if you look closely, that is also a stop motion. And I just took the original stop motion and I
Right.
shrunk it down and I cropped a little circle out of it. And then I pasted it onto the phone. Because
Right.
as you're photographing a phone, and if you're trying to include the phone in the stop motion, there's also these little graphics on the phone that you have to kind of recreate in Photoshop or somehow
Yeah.
get them to make it look realistic, because the camera app in your phone has all these lines and circles and stuff where it shows you the picture, and all that doesn't appear in a normal stop motion, or a normal video for that matter. So yeah, so I had to recreate each one of those little lines. There's like with the Samsung, there's like 3 little lines and then like a square and like an arrow underneath the photo app, so I had to recreate that in Photoshop, and also the little circle in Photoshop. And it's like a mix of Photoshop and more Photoshop.
How long did it take you to put all of that together, from shooting to editing?
That was really quick. That was kind of like, I had the idea in pre-production. I just had the idea. And then as soon as I got to the table, I realized that the idea didn't work at all. And so after that point, it was all just kind of on the fly. Like, oh yeah, I can make this stop motion with my camera, until it reaches the phone. And then I tried to move my camera, and I spent a couple hours trying to find the right lens and the right camera position that would give me the perspective that you would think you would see on the phone camera, to make it look realistic. That didn't work. And so I just said, you know what, screw it. I'll just take the picture I'll just make the stop motion from the phone. And then I'll so like the cherry moves across the frame, and that's one stop motion. And then I kind of, once it touches the phone, I kind of pause the frame, and that's a still image. And then I just mask out the square or the rectangle that is the phone camera perspective. And then that's another stop motion. And everything else is just a still image, And if that makes sense, does that make any sense?
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, and this doesn't make any sense as to what everybody's what we're talking about here, go and watch it.
Well, in fact, we could put it into this podcast. So if you haven't seen it,
yes,
you'll see it now.
So this is a fascination with mine. Actually, is combining stop motion with video, with photography, and trying to blend all of those into one single. There's actually another stop motion I did. It was the first campaign on Instagram that I did for Samsung, where it's like the phone is sitting on the table, and it's kind of this like Inception thing. It's going, you can watch it on my Instagram. It's basically the stop motion starts, and then the camera pulls out, and you notice it's a phone, and then it just continuously pulls out, kind of like a infinite reflection on a mirror. And
very cool.
When you start a video stream on your computer and you record yourself, and that infinite mirrored image happens, I kind of wanted to replicate that in stop motion. And so I tried that. And so there's a drink off to one side, and the drink is like rotating with ice cubes. That's a video.
Right.
And then
I was going to ask you how you did that.
Yeah, then the watch, there's a watch in the frame and you can see the watch face, that's also a video. And then the rest of it is stop motion with like the limes rolling across the table. And then pulling out of the frame is, video animation inside of editing. And so it's kind of a combination of all these different techniques into one. And that's where I'm more fascinated in, is because stop motion is fun. But there's other things that you can do now with digital photography. And I really love blending video and stop motion together. I have a couple of videos where like I'm talking and stop motion is happening in front of me and stuff.
That's cool.
I think that's really cool. I like the whole Mary Poppins aspect.
What are you using to blend all these things together?
Premiere, Photoshop, Premiere, and stuff.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Mary Poppins did it best. Do you guys see Mary Poppins? You guys in England love Mary Poppins. It's your favorite movie, right? Dick Van Dyke's accent's the best. It's the best British accent ever.
It doesn't get any better than that, does it?
Exactly, right? Yeah.
Oh dear.
So like, that scene in Mary Poppins where they're cleaning up their toys in the room, and it's a mix of video and stop motion, which is really cool. And that's how they did it back in the day, and I think a lot of those old techniques brought into the new space, I think, is really cool. I want to continue to do more of that kind of stuff.
This is kind of Harryhausen effect, that's that like really stop motion kind of look. I think that's really really interesting.
I was watching on there's a short series on Netflix at the moment called something the movies that made us.
Oh yes, I saw that.
Yeah, it's got Back to the Future in it. But the one that's sticking out in my mind with what we're talking about here is Jurassic Park.
Oh yeah,
and that came out in like 93, 94, something there or thereabouts. And they originally were going to do it all in all of the dinosaur stuff as stop motion,
right?
And they got them started, and I forget the company's name, but they were just getting into digital and, computers doing, CGI as we'd call it now. And he said, no, we can do it. And I said, no, we've got so-and-so doing this. And then they went and did it secretly and built the skeleton. They built all of that kind of stuff. And they just, at one screening, they just left it on a monitor just as they were entering. And they all walked in, and Steven Spielberg was there. And you walked in and go, what's that? Oh, it's just something we were working on. There's nothing, And he looked at it, I want that.
Right.
And that's how it became the Jurassic Park that we know. They then sat down and did all of it like that. But then they felt so bad for the guy that was doing stop motion, who did all the stop motion back then, that they got him in to consult on doing the way he believes dinosaurs would move and things like that. And that was kind of the death of stop motion at that point.
There was an interesting thing on when I did The Empire Strikes Back. The battle scenes on Hoth, where you've got the ads walking across the surface, across the snow. And the interesting thing there was when they had this stage set up, and all the models on it, and we're doing the stop motion, and it just didn't look real at all. It looked like models until somebody figured that what we should be seeing is some degree of motion blur, and that's really what's missing. And so the way they ingeniously did that was that they put the whole set on a vibrating platform. So every time they took a frame, clever. The whole thing was ever so slightly vibrating.
That is amazing.
And it's so simple when you think about it. But what that did was it basically blended that natural motion blur with the stop motion. And that's why these movements seemed, for the time, of course, a lot more fluid. Of course, when you watch it back now, it's a little, that's stop motion, but because we're used to CGI and all the rest of it. But it's still pretty damn good.
Yeah, CGI.
I think the blend of video and stop motion has been going on for so long. I mean, all the way back to color, when color first arrived. And it's such an old technique that to lose it, I think would be sad. So I think it needs to be continued on. For sure. And I'd love to do it any way I possibly can. Anytime I get a chance, I'll blend video and stop motion together, because I think it's fascinating. It's like the coolest video trick you could ever do.
So we've come to the end of this week's episode 72 of the Camera Shake podcast. This week with Skyler Burt. Skyler, it was an absolute education having you on the show.
Thank you, man.
It was great being here. I really appreciate your inviting.
Fantastic. So if you like this episode, make sure you like it. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, of course, do us a favor and hit the subscribe button, ring the bell thingy, and all the rest of that. Also, before I forget, two very important things. We are going to be at the photography show in Birmingham from September the 19th to the 20th. So we're going to be there on the Sunday and the Monday. If you want to come and say hello, do that. We would really appreciate that. And of course, as always, if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, make sure you head over to YouTube, youtube.com/Camera Shake. Did I forget anything?
Join
Join our community. Yeah,
we together.
Cool. Of course, if you like what you heard in this podcast, all of Skyler's details are going to be in the description, so make sure you check that out. That'd be super awesome. Now,
if you weren't 100% sure, it's actually Birmingham we'll be in.
Birmingham?
Not Birmingham.
Oh, is it not Birmingham?
No,
Birmingham?
not in this country.
How do you say? Is it Birmingham?
Birmingham.
Oh, Birmingham. You got to say it with a slight whine. I think that's. We've just lost
Birmingham.
all of our listeners in Birmingham. Fantastic. Anyway, that being said, we have truly come to the end of episode 72. We will see you again next Thursday. As always, take it easy. See you then.